The most absurd animals ever used on the battlefield. No, this is real, unfortunately. Okay, hold on. Congratulations for watching this video because the YouTube algorithm already brought you here and we both know it. You were probably scrolling through the recommended feed, saw this title, said, "What kind of nonsense is this?" and clicked. I get it. If I were you, I'd have been skeptical at first too. I'd have said there's no way this is real, and then I would have gotten completely pulled in. But let me tell you this, what you're about to see today is going to put you in full, "I've lost all hope that humanity is progressing" mode. Here's the deal. Armies tried to use animals as weapons in war. They actually did it. And no, I don't just mean cavalry charge on horseback. I'm talking more along the lines of strapping napalm bombs to bats, stuffing chickens inside nuclear landmines, and training dolphins to attack enemy divers. You're probably thinking right now, okay, this is clickbait. My friend, I wish it were. They shouldn't have sent animals to war, but life isn't fair. Now lean back in your seat, because welcome to history's greatest Who Approved This or moments. Part 1. Bat Bombs. The Bat Bomb Project. It's the middle of World War II and you're an American military official. The Japanese are advancing rapidly and you need to develop effective weapons against them. You've got $1 billion budget on your desk. The world's brightest engineers are lined up outside your door, and you have plenty of options. You could split the atom, develop rockets, build radar systems, and then you hold a meeting where someone says, "Guys, what if we turned bats into bombs?" Nobody in the room takes you seriously. Everyone looks at you like you're crazy. But you push back. You've prepared your slides, you've gathered data, and somehow, I genuinely don't know how, history doesn't fully answer this question. You get this project approved, and that is the birth of the Bat Bomb Project. Official name, Project X-Ray. Sounds cool, right? X-Ray. But when you look at what it actually involved, Operation Bat Bomb would have been more honest. Here was the plan. First, millions of small bats living in the caves of Mexico, specifically Mexican free-tailed bats, would be captured. A small napalm bomb would be attached to each one's chest. These bats would then be sedated with cold temperatures, placed inside special capsules, and dropped from aircraft over Japanese cities. The capsules would open at a certain altitude, the bats would wake up, and out of pure instinct they'd have to find shelter. Japan's cities at the time were largely made up of wooden structures, making them a perfect destination for bats. So, theoretically, thousands of bats would hide in the ceilings, walls, and rooftops of thousands of Japanese buildings, and then they'd all go boom at the same time. Does it make theoretical sense? Kind of, yeah. Practically speaking, I can't say the same. On the first test day, instead of waking up as planned, the bats woke up at an unexpected moment and flew directly over the test crew. Some of them escaped. Then a group hid in the rafters of an aircraft hangar, and the explosives went active. A U.S. Navy aircraft hangar was destroyed by its own bat bombs. A general lost his car. Several officers had to run for evacuation. Japan hadn't even come into the picture yet, but the hangar was already gone. So the U.S. burned down its own facility with its own weapon before sending a single bat toward the enemy. At this point, a normal person would say, "Okay, this isn't working, let's drop it." What did they say? "Let's catch more bats." Maybe that was America's greatest strength. The project ended in disaster, but they took the lessons from that wreckage and pressed forward to do better. The project ran until 1944. A total of $2 million was spent. The team grew, tests continued, reports were written, and eventually the project was canceled, but not because of the bats. The Manhattan Project, the nuclear bomb program, took priority and swallowed the entire budget. So humanity was genuinely forced to ask the question, bat bombs or atomic bomb, and chose the atomic bomb. Not because it was the less crazy option, but simply because it got more funding and there wasn't enough budget left for the Bat Bomb Project. History's most absurd second place award belongs to those bats and the unfortunate crew that had to catch them. Part 2. Chicken-powered nuclear landmines, the Blue Peacock Project. Okay, Did you digest the bats? Good. Because I'm about to talk about a plan that's even more absurd than the bats, and I wanted to give you fair warning. 1954, the height of the Cold War, and this time the scene shifts to England. The British military was planning to plant nuclear landmines on West German soil. The idea was this: if the Soviets attempted an invasion, these mines would be detonated to stop the Soviet army, and a significant portion of Germany would be wiped off the map along with the Soviet forces. Yes, this plan was a complete disaster scenario from both an ethical and logistical standpoint, but every Cold War story starts the same way. It made sense at the time. The technical problem was this: during winter months, the ground in northern Germany was so cold that electronic detonation systems wouldn't function properly. Engineers spent days racking their brains over the problem: a heating circuit, a chemical heat pack. And right then, in the middle of a meeting, one engineer suggested, "Let's put live chickens inside the mines." A deep silence fell over the room. The man continued, "The chickens will keep the electronics warm with their body heat. We put food and water inside. They can survive for weeks." Now pay attention. This idea was taken seriously. An official report was prepared to move it forward, and a working group was created. The project was named Blue Peacock. Exactly how the chickens would be positioned, how long they could survive with a given amount of food, and how many degrees their body heat could keep the electronics warm, all of it was meticulously calculated. These are real documents, official British government documents stamped classified bearing the royal seal. When the classification was lifted in 2004, the historians examining these documents initially thought it was an April Fool's joke. But after a closer look, they learned it was no joke. It was completely real. In the end, the project was canceled, but not because of the chickens. It was because of a diplomatic crisis. The question of who is burying nuclear mines in whose territory blew up. Germany had not been informed of the plan. When they found out, a diplomatic crisis erupted and the project was shelved. So the chicken-powered nuclear landmine idea was killed not technically, but diplomatically. Wait a moment. Technically, there was no problem. The real failure point of this project wasn't, "Let's put chickens in it." The failure was everything was fully ready, but we forgot to ask the neighbor. You can sit with that information and think deeply for a while. Part 3, Dolphins, the Secret Soldiers of the Sea. The Cold War, the US and the USSR, two superpowers spending years pointing nuclear warheads at each other. And then one day, the exact same strange idea occurred to both sides. Let's make soldiers out of dolphins. Is that a coincidence, or was the same person working for both sides? This is not a metaphor. Both countries officially established marine mammal programs. In the U.S. program, dolphins went through an extensive training regimen. They learned to detect enemy divers using their sonar system. They learned to locate underwater mines and to transport specific objects from one location to another. According to some reports, they even learned to approach enemy divers with needle injectors attached to their bodies to neutralize them. Dolphins were remarkably good at this work because they truly are remarkable animals. Intelligent, fast, and their sonar systems put even the world's most advanced submarine technology to shame. But here's the problem: dolphins could make their own decisions. One dolphin escaped from the training camp and never came back. Some dolphins started following fishing boats, which made perfect sense since fishing boats carried more food for them. But even with those minor setbacks, dolphins still did outstanding work underwater. So the U.S. Navy spent millions of dollars training military personnel who then rewrote their own job descriptions on their own terms. This is actually very similar to some employees in the human military. But I'm not going to say that out loud. And do you want to know something? This program is still running today. The U.S. Navy maintains an active dolphin and sea lion program in San Diego. Officially, it's said to be used for non-lethal mine clearance. But think about this. Right now, you're sitting in your chair watching a video, while somewhere out in the open ocean, a dolphin is on duty, carrying out a mission. Compare your lives for a moment. Yeah, like I said before, life is never fair. Part 4, Pigeon Missiles, Project Pigeon. Now a very different figure steps onto the World War II stage, B. F. Skinner. One of the founding figures of behavioral psychology, this man developed his theory of conditioning by ringing bells and giving food to rats, taught reflexes to dogs, and laid the foundational building blocks of modern psychology. A great, respected, brilliant scientist. And one day he thought to himself, what if I used pigeons as a missile guidance system? The idea might sound ridiculous, but Skinner had calculated everything with extreme precision. Pigeons would be trained to recognize an image of the target. A small screen would be placed in the nose of the missile. When the missile drifted off course, the pigeon would peck at the screen with its beak, and the missile would correct its trajectory to hit the target dead on. As absurd as it sounds, this system worked with 100% accuracy during testing. No matter how much pressure the pigeons were under, they completed their missions because they had been conditioned with food rewards, and Skinner knew that mechanism inside and out. Skinner went to the military with excitement, presented his data, showed his evidence, and look, it works. What did the military say? No. Why? Because the moment the technical advisors in the meeting heard the concept of a missile with a pigeon inside, they laughed it off. They didn't look at the data, the test results, or anything else. The project was defunded, and Skinner went home deeply disappointed. Maybe if they had glanced at the data and test results, everything would have turned out completely differently. And these are the same people who today generate conspiracy theories about 5G towers, buy homeopathic remedies, and pay 3 times the price for water just because it's labeled natural. Part 5, Hannibal's Elephants, History's Greatest Boss Fight. If we're talking about the history of absurd military animals, there's no way to skip Hannibal Barca. 218 BC, Carthage's greatest commander is planning to cross the Alps with 37 war elephants and approximately 40,000 soldiers. The Alps in the middle of winter, covered in ice, barely passable for humans, and he was planning to cross them with elephants. Rome was expecting an attack from Spain. The northern Italian border was heavily fortified. The sea routes were under control. Hannibal looked at all of this planning and thought, I'm coming through the Alps. Rome, nobody can come through the Alps. Hannibal, LOL. And he actually crossed. In a 15-day death march, he lost thousands of soldiers and the majority of his elephants. But he crossed. He came through Rome's back door, and Italy was instantly stunned. This can't be happening. This wasn't just military genius. It was one of the greatest nobody-saw-it-coming moments in history. Elephants were truly terrifying on the battlefield. Their massive size and thunderous noise were enough to send opposing armies into panic even before the battle began. Horses didn't know what elephants were, and when they found out, they bolted, taking their riders with them. Infantry units would get trapped between the elephants, but elephants had a serious software bug. When a panicked elephant no longer recognized anything in front of it, it would trample everything in its path without distinguishing between enemy or ally. So Hannibal's own soldiers were now fighting the enemy while simultaneously running from their own elephants, one of history's most expensive instances of friendly fire. And Rome eventually found the solution: pigs. When pigs squealed loudly, the elephants would panic and turn back. The most powerful weapon of the ancient world was repelled by nothing more than the sound of a pig. What did Hannibal feel when he learned this? One of those questions history never answers. Part 6, Anti-Tank Dogs. The Soviets' patch failure, World War II. The Soviet Union. Nazi Germany's tanks were advancing across Soviet territory step by step, and the Soviets were desperately searching for a fast solution, and they found one. They would strap explosives to dogs' backs and send them under the tanks. The training process was theoretically simple. Dogs were given food when they went under tanks. This reflex was developed over weeks. The moment the dog went under the tank, it heard a clicking sound and the explosive went active. Does it sound logical? No. After all, the dog is a living creature, but the Nazi tanks were advancing fast. Stopping them was nearly impossible. and the Soviets were deep in that desperate moment. Now, where was the problem? The dogs were trained under Soviet tanks. This small but fatal detail ruined everything. The dogs sent to the battlefield didn't recognize the sound, smell, or appearance of Nazi tanks. They were unfamiliar to them, but they knew Soviet tanks extremely well, and Soviet tanks were closer to them. Throughout training, that smell, that sound, that vibration had meant food is here. So the dogs instinctively ran straight under Soviet tanks and the explosives went active. Soviet tanks were destroyed by their own anti-tank dogs. This wasn't just a strategic error, it was one of history's greatest self-nerf moments. In the gaming world, they'd call this an unintended mechanic. In real life, they called it, "Why are our tanks retreating?" The program was officially discontinued in 1942. But according to some sources, in Soviet and Russian military records, this program remained listed as active status all the way until 1996. Never underestimate the power of bureaucratic inertia. Okay, now sit back calmly and think. You're living in the 21st century. You have a device in your pocket that gives you access to infinite information. Humanity is going to space. Artificial intelligence is writing, cancer treatments are being developed. And throughout this entire journey, some of the world's best educated, best funded, most intelligent people have from time to time pushed forward the most seemingly ridiculous idea and pursued them with tremendous ambition and focus. Some succeeded, some still failed, but at least they took the step to try. That alone takes enormous courage. Worst case scenario, history mentions you in a weird YouTube video 80 years later. And honestly, that's its own kind of immortality. If you enjoyed this video, you can hit the like button. The YouTube algorithm will be happy, I'll get motivated, and I'll research and make more videos like this. And if you're currently thinking, I wasted my time on this much nonsense, my friend, you now know about pigeon missiles, chicken-powered nuclear mines, and bat bombs. What you do with that knowledge is entirely up to you. Maybe someday you'll come up with an idea that sounds totally crazy, and it turns out to be a massive success. See you next time. Note, this video is not sponsored. If you are developing bat bombs, please do not contact us.